So my locals just held a box tournament for Rarity Collection 2, and I got second place. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, Otaku here, back with another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video. So today, instead of talking about like regionals and stuff like that, or just the current format, I want to talk about just kind of what's going on at my locals. At the current moment, I'm still struggling to actually turn on the camera and do vlogs at locals. I don't really know currently how I want to do them. I don't want to just do the typical turn on the camera and just record everything that's going on. So I'm trying to figure out like what I want my style to be for vlogging. But all that aside, my locals did just have a Rarity Collection 2 box tournament, and it was about a 16-person turnout or a 13-person turnout. So it wasn't too bad, but I got second place. It was a 4-round tournament, and I went X1, and the only person I lost to was the guy that won the tournament. My matchups were 2 Tenpai, one in round 1 and one in round 3. I lost to one of them and beat the other one, but then I went against Unchained and Runic Sprite. And we will be getting into the deck profile here in a minute, but I will be showing off the side deck for once, unlike most deck profiles. And the reason being is because, like I say in all my deck profile videos, your side deck is tailored around the event you're preparing for, whether it's locals, regionals, nationals, or just a big case tournament or something. And normally my deck profiles have been more tailored towards regionals, but because this was at my locals, I want to kind of give an example of like what I was expecting and how I tailored my side deck for that. Because as I'm sure we all know, not every locals is going to be filled with just meta decks. So the question here is what did I bring to the table? And I'm sure as you all see in the title and even in the thumbnail, I brought Melodious Chimera. Now, I have talked an extensive amount about Chimera here on the channel as of recently, and by no means am I close to being done because I will be talking about a whole video with Fiendsmith Chimera here in the future. And I, of course, did a whole video talking about my opinions on the Melodious engine, all of the videos in which will be in the description down below. And before we do jump into this deck profile, be sure to leave a like on this video and also subscribe if you're not already and you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. But with that, let's just get into the deck profile. So to begin, we are going to start with our Chimera cards. So we are running 2 Gazelle, 2 Baphomet, 3 of the Cornfield Codal, and 3 of the Mirror Sword Knight. Some builds and most builds run 3 Gazelle, but for the Melodious deck, or the Melodious version, I went to 2 Gazelle. This is a card that conflicts with the normal summon, and sometimes you have to normal summon that Refrain, or even Tam Tam. So you don't really want too many conflicting cards for that normal summon, but also, as we will get into in the extra deck, I don't need nearly as many Gazelle as some builds end up needing, or a more pure version of the deck needs. So I only run the 2 Gazelle. Other than that, the rest of the ratios are pretty standard. As for the rest of our illusion monsters, or just Chimera cards, I am only running 2 of the Nightmare Apprentice, 1 Diabells, 1 Tau, and then we are running for the remainder of the non-Melodious monsters, 2 Edgem Chain, and 1 Dark Barrier Statue. So most builds, and even in this build, I wanted to run that 3rd Nightmare Apprentice because Nightmare Apprentice is a 1-card combo and just a free extender. I just felt like I didn't need the 3rd one. Nightmare Apprentice does tend to sometimes not be needed or is just completely unnecessary. But also, I was trying to round it down to 45. This is a 45-card build. And that 46 card was really kind of getting annoying. Could realistically have continued to run it, and actually in the loss with Tenpai, I would have actually really liked to have seen another, or had a more possible chance of seeing the Nightmare Apprentice. However, you live, you learn. I will probably end up putting the 3rd one back in the deck and just live with the 46th card. As for the rest of this is pretty standard. Some people like to side the Dark Barrier Statue. I didn't want to clog up that slot in my side deck with the Barrier Statue. We'll get into that in a minute when we get to the side deck. But he does conflict with the normal summon, but he is just a fiend, so I can use him to make the Chimera fusions if necessary, and might not even need to summon him. It just really doesn't matter sometimes. For our Melodious monsters, we are running 3 of the Refrain, 1 of the Couplet, or however you want to pronounce it, and then 1 Tam Tam. So, like I said, these cards, mainly Refrain and Tam Tam, conflict for the normal summon sometimes. Sometimes you just want to normal summon them, try and get their effects off, and maybe bait out an Imperm or something, but you don't want your other cards to be hurt in the process. Couplet, you should never be normal summoning this card. Honestly, you realistically should never be summoning it to begin with. But Tam Tam, if you don't know what it does, when it's summoned, it searches out a poly, which in some hands is actually really necessary. especially if you can't summon this out via the Botcha effect or just some other Melodious effect in general. As for spells, we are running 3 of the Chimera Fusion, 3 Fright for Patchwork, 2 Polymerization, and 2 Triple Tactics Talents. These are the non-Melodious spell cards, of course. I considered running 3 Poly because Poly can be searched via, Patchwork, which is essentially being searched by Edge of Chain. It can be searched by Tam Tam. There's just like a lot of ways to get Poly out of the deck, and with running 3 Patchwork, this can be risky to be searching off of Tam Tam. However, spoiler alert, I am running Magnum the Reliever in the X-Deck, so in some scenarios, I can put the Poly back into the deck so that way Patchwork isn't a dead card if I use Patchwork and Tam Tam in the same turn. That way, I can maybe recycle a Poly, so that way the next Patchwork is actually more live. Talent, this card honestly needs to be fucking banned. This card's just broken. I'm pretty sick of seeing this card, but at the same time, it's a necessary evil with a 21 hand trap format. It just punishes people for using hand traps, especially in a format that's just flooded with them. Honestly, I considered running the 3rd. I just couldn't really justify it because there are just those decks like Branded that don't run any hand traps, and if you're going first and you see this in your hand, it's just a dead card. As for the Melodious spells, we are running 3 Ostinato and 1 Concerto. Ostinato is just kind of it's a make or break. You either see it or you don't. If it resolves, you just pop off. If it doesn't resolve, you most likely just got an Ash Blossom or a very valuable negate out of your opponent. And in this entire tournament, I only saw Ostinato once, and it got ashed, so it never actually resolved at all during this case tournament. That being said, because Ostinato got ashed, I normal summoned Mirror Sword Knight, and Sword Knight was able to resolve, meaning that the rest of my Chimera combo managed to pop off. As for Concerto, this card's just cracked. If you see one of the Melodious cards in your hand, and you can get another one into your hand via, like, Refrain effect, you activate this, and then you're just able to kind of get a free body on board for Link summoning, and then when that card leaves the field, you just draw a card. I was going against the Sprite player, and he used Double Cross to attach my Botcha to his Gigantic, and then he linked away his Gigantic, to which I then activated this to draw a card, which helped me draw Ash Blossom, which negated his Fountain. Card's really cracked because the Melodious Fusion just has to hit the graveyard, so it doesn't actually have to be destroyed, which means this card's just, even on your opponent's turn, just waiting to draw you a card. It's very powerful. Unfortunately, it puts itself back in the deck, and after using it the first time, especially in the engine, you really don't want to see this again. So it's really risky once you shuffle your deck from any sort of searching, because if you top deck this after you've used its, you've already done the whole combo with the engine, if you draw this in a grind game, you're fucked. We are only running 9 hand traps, which of course is not the ideal ratios for hand traps in the current format, but at the same time, I'm pretty fucking sick of the current format. I could run a more pure version of Chimera and run probably closer to like 18 hand traps, but I chose trying to run a little bit more gas and like cards that could bait hand traps, aka the Melodious cards. Ostinato is just a ash this or you fucking lose. The whole Melodious combo is nib me before I get to Vortex Dragon or you fucking lose. The Refrain can set up a scenario where your opponent has to Veiler or Impermit to kind of make it so you commit your normal summon, and then they hope that you don't have more gas after that. Just the whole Melodious engine kind of baits out hand traps, so that way the Chimera stuff can actually play the game. So for our hand traps, I am running 3 Ghost Ogre, of course for Tenpai, but in general, Ghost Ogre is just really good in this current format. Voiceless Voice really does not like this card. If they activate Barrier or Blessing or the Trap card, you can just go Ogre to pop it, as long as they don't have like the Omni Negate on board, of course. The obvious one is Tenpai Dragon with their field spell. However, this card, a good Tenpai player can make this card irrelevant. They play their field spell just for the protection, and then they go into level 10, and at that point, you're already losing before the battle phase. So good Tenpai players can make this a little bit more irrelevant, but even so, this punishes the bad Tenpai players, but also the good players that have bad hands. So Ogre's just really powerful this current format because there's so many field spells and there's so many decks that can be punished by Ghost Ogre in general. And then, of course, we have 3 Ash Blossom. We're just hitting the most generic form of interaction in the game, which is adding cards to hand or special summoning. There's not much to say about Ash Blossom. I don't want to say you have to run it, obviously, because there was that whole argument with Snake Eye. They summon Hita and punish you for using Ash Blossom, but Ash Blossom, of course, is still there. Punishes branded players. They don't lose to Ash Blossom. I don't play under that stereotype, but again, there's not much to say about Ash. And then 3 Imperm. Target Negation is just so powerful, this current format. If I could run Veiler, I would be running Veiler, even possibly Mourner. All right, so moving on to the extra deck, I do want to point out that I will be putting up an image when we get to it of a card that I had to borrow during the tournament because mine didn't show up in the mail on time for this tournament. So just keep that in mind that I only physically have 14 cards. However, the 15th card was played, and it actually did come up twice. So you will just see a random JPEG image here in the extra deck, like just like with the Goaty deck. But to start, we will start with our Chimera Fusions. We do run the 2 Baphomet. We run 2 Baphomet. He's the most flexible between him and Chimera, but also we are only running the 1 Chimera, and we of course are running the 1 Illusion Beast. We only run 1 of him, of the Phantom Beast, because he is really only essential for, of course, ripping a card out of your opponent's hand, which only comes up once, but also 2, you can kind of revive him back from the banish pile after he banishes himself with this guy, but he's more strict. You need a Beast and a Fiend to summon him, which, of course, Baphomet can kind of manipulate that, and so can Gazelle. But realistically, with the way the deck is kind of going, the deck's more flexible with him because you have all these illusion monsters, and you can have a Beast or a Fiend in your hand or field to make him. The deck's just a lot more flexible with him at 2 and him at 1, but we needed that extra deck space as well. Of course, this is our OTK strategy. He never actually came up, I'll be honest. He never came up once. Any scenario where I could have tried to OTK, my opponent had their monsters in defense mode. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were playing around. Unfortunately, it did not come up. I only run the 1 Guardian Chimera. 2 does come up, but in this build, extra deck is very tight. And also, I actually managed to summon this out like 4 times in the entire tournament. The card's really powerful. Not much to say about Guardian Chimera specifically, but I know a lot of people would run him at 2, but I think in the Melodious build, 1 is enough. We are then running 2 Abacha. 2 Abacha is a mandatory because if you resolve Asinato, the goal is to summon out both of these to make the Absolute Dragon, which we'll get into in a minute, so that way we can go into Vortex Dragon. 2 Bacha is mandatory. Very just powerful card in general, though. She's part of the combo that helps you out summon out Tam Tam either from the deck or the graveyard. However, whatever order you do with the Asinato, then of course Tam Tam can search us out a Polymerization. And then Tam Tam's also a time card. I forgot to mention that when we were talking about her. Tam Tam, when uses fusion material, burns your opponent for 500. Comes in clutch during time. But Bacha is a must at 2. And then, of course, I am running the 1 Magnum, the Reliever. It's just a threatening card. It pops a card. He's a Fiend, so he can be used to make one of the Chimera Fusions. But also, we draw a card. We put that poly back in the deck like I was talking about with Tam Tam and like the Patchwork Engine. If I need to recycle a Polymerization, draw a card. Then I'm running the Vortex Dragon, which we of course summon out with the Absolute Dragon. Vortex Dragon's just Nominee Negate. That's all there is to it, and Odd Eyes Absolute is just there to summon out the Vortex. The rest of the extra deck is pretty straightforward. We are running 1 Beatrice. We run a lot of level 6s in the deck. Nightmare Apprentice and the Chimera Fusions are all level 6s, so you can use this to summon out Beatrice, and then you can dump the Chimera as a material to dump a different card from the deck. Most likely you're going to dump Diabells, the statue, Tau, however your sequencing needs to go to break an opponent's board, or set up just a very ideal board so your opponent can't break yours. And the deck doesn't really lock you into fusion summoning except for Baphomet, but the thing is Baphomet says for the rest of the turn after you activate his effect, and also you can play around that. You don't have to go for Baphomet's effect per se to search, but it's very easy to play around it, so that way you can go into Xyz summoning, Synchro summoning, Link summoning, as we're going to get into. So realistically, the deck can very much play around fusion summoning and just play around with other types, which means D-Barrier is less effective against this deck. We're also running the Chaos Angel because Nightmare Apprentice and Mirror Sword Knight is just a light and dark Chaos Angel, which makes it in a towers. It's hard to get rid of it unless you have like Super Poly or Imperm or Forbidden Droplet. It's just going to be really hard to get rid of this card. Then we have Little Knight, Appaloosa, and then as I will put on the screen here, I was running one Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep is like really good in this deck. One, because it can summon out that level 4 from the graveyard, which means you can like revive Mirror Sword Knight. It is essential in the Melodious combo, so that way you can just kind of recycle a bunch of bodies. But also, it's a beast, meaning that if you don't have access to Gazelle and you don't even have access to Baphomet, but you have an Edge Chain in your hand, you can still make the Chimera fusions, so that way you can still kind of try and get to that part of the deck. So just again, Cross Sheep is kind of an essential. I was running at one point IP Masquerena instead of Cross Sheep, but I realized really quickly Cross Sheep was a lot more powerful. For the side deck, like I said, I don't normally show these off in these deck profile videos. However, because this was a local event, I kind of want to show you guys how I change my side deck building for locals specifically, and so that way I know what to expect. Mainly what gets played at my locals is stuff like Generator, Voiceless Voice. There are some Snake Eye players. There's a couple Tenpai players, Unchained, Yubel. There's a wide assortment of stuff that gets played. Noble Knights is another one that gets played at my locals. Sky Striker. So I kind of have to tailor it around what I normally see at my locals. And to start, I, of course, have Nibiru, the Primal Being. Nibiru is actually really powerful against Generator, essentially, because when they summon out all those tokens, most likely they summon out Har. So Har will negate this, but then that rips Har's negate right out the gate. So that way he just can't be annoying. But also, Nibiru is just really good about keeping a lot of the other rogue decks that get played at my locals at bay. This was really good against my Unchained match. The dude even called it. He summoned out one Shyama and then used Aruha's effect to summon out another Shyama, and he's just like, "You got Nib?" And I was just like, "Yeah, I got Nib." And sure enough, Nibiru kind of won me that game. So again, Nibiru is just kind of a must, I think, for a locals format, because you just don't really know what you're gonna see, and because of that, you could see just a balls to the wall combo deck that's gonna summon a bajillion times, and because Baron's no longer in the game, it's harder to prevent Nib from smacking the shit out of you. I only played 2 because I didn't really have the room for the third one in the side deck, but also I don't own a third copy, so mainly just 2, and it does get seen and it comes up. I then also run the Bestials. Bestials are really good for a wide assortment of things. It can banish the IP from the graveyard against Snake Eye. It's good against Sky Strikers because you can banish the Ray, so that way the Ray can't bring itself back. It's really good against Voiceless, of course, because of low. Bestials are just very diverse, but also they're free bodies to the board. And then, of course, because they're darks, I can kind of use them. I can utilize them, but Guardian Chimera is just really good because if you use 2 monsters on the board and one of them's Druid Swarm, you essentially get 3 pops and then a draw. It's just bonkers. But then also the Bestials came up against the Unchained player. The Unchained player activated the trap card that can revive a monster from the graveyard. I used Druid Swarm to banish Rage, so he then turned around and summoned Shavara back from the graveyard, so meaning he didn't really have any further interaction at that point, and then I am sitting on a Druid Swarm. But I then linked away Druid Swarm to make Cross Sheep, and then Druid Swarm sent the Shavara because I had Talents in hand, so I wanted to force him to use a monster effect during my main phase, and sure enough, he went for the bait. He used Shavara in the graveyard to set a trap, and then I used Talents, drew 2, and I drew fucking bonkers off of that. I drew a Cosmic Cyclone to banish the card he just set, and then I drew God, I don't remember what the final card was, but I just remember it was it was the 2 cards I drew won me the game. Next, I'm running 3 Cosmic Cyclone. Cosmic Cyclone is a lot better, I think, in a more regional, or not regional, in a more locals format style, because you don't really know what kind of back row removal you're going to need, whether you want blowout or like specific. This, of course, came up during the Unchained deck, but this came up versus Runic as well. It comes up against one of the Labyrinth players that I play against at locals. Obviously, Tenpai, it's really good for getting rid of the field spell. Cosmic just really comes up. And yes, it hurts you when you're playing into time, and Tam Tam can't close that gap, but it is, in my opinion, well worth it, and Cosmic really came up at this tournament. So for this next card, it didn't actually come up. I don't think I ever actually got to use it. I sided it twice, I just never saw it. I run 3 Forbidden Droplets. Like I said, it never came up because I never saw it, but it's just a good card, obviously. Forbidden Droplet, I think, is one of the more underrated cards in this current format. The only time I actually saw it in my hand, my opponent activated Shifter, so it was immediately a dead card, so I got rid of it with Nightmare Apprentice. Droplet just, it can be activated in the damage step, unlike most card effects, because it alters attack points, meaning that it's good against Tenpai, and also it's just good for breaking boards. I side this when I'm going second. Pretty much what I tend to do is I side out the Melodious cards if I know that my opponent's going to make me go second. So that way I don't have to play grind game with the Melodious cards, because that's just not ideal, which is why I tend to try and have 9 cards in the extra deck that can be sided in most circumstances. So at the 9 cards you have already seen, essentially, or most of the cards you have already seen in the side deck are the cards that got sided in when I sided the Melodious out. The remaining cards in the side deck, we have 4 of them, and one of them is Tiger King Wengu. This is really good against Runic Sprite. You just summon this, and any card they summon off of a Runic card gets blown up. Any Sprite card they summon gets blown up. They don't really have a way to out this other than freezing curses, but by the time I summon this, I already have a Chimera monster on the board, and meaning that he can't be targeted because I most likely have Cornfield in the graveyard. But also in the ideal end board against the Runic Sprite player, I had the Diabells and Wengu on board, meaning that they just really could not play. But then we also have Tikaboo. This came up, and it failed me. So Tikaboo, I actually did see against Tenpai. We got to turn 23 on game 2, and I still somehow was not seeing Engine. I drew 15 hand traps back to back to back, or just not 15 hand traps, but like 15 just unplayable cards that could not get me to my deck. So Tikaboo just really let me down. He couldn't play until he just kind of got to a point where he was able to just out me. So yeah, Tikaboo, still a good card, just in this particular example, let me down. And then our last 2 cards are the Archfiend Hyris and the Simmel Archfiend. Simmel Archfiend is, in my opinion, in the current format, a better D-barrier, especially against the Tenpai. So Archfiend Hyris, when sent to the graveyard, can just search Archfiends, or Simmel Archfiends, and Simmel Archfiends just makes it so your opponent can't summon a Link, Synchro, Xyz, Ritual, or Fusion monster if they already control one. So against Tenpai specifically, it means that they kind of, if they Synchro once, they lock themselves out of Synchro. If they Link once, they lock themselves out. Because if you go D-Barrier against them, 1, they can cross it out because they run Crossout Designator and they run D-Barrier in the side, so that way they can use Crossout against it. But also, Simmel Archfiends, like, if you go D-Barrier and it resolves, and you call Synchro, they're just going to go for the Link line. Because a lot of what they're doing right now is they run the normal Synchro package, but also they run the Link OTK with Zelantis and the Salamangreat card. So I just think D-Barrier is not as good against Tenpai as people would like to give it credit for, whereas Simmel shuts off both lines. And that's really it for the deck profile. Like I said, I'm not done talking about Chimera by any means on this channel. Chimera is one of my favorite decks of all time, and now that it's got some extra support, and also it's getting Fiendsmith real soon, which is going to make it even better of a deck, we're going to be talking about it a lot here on the channel. So also make sure you take a look at the in-depth guide I made of Chimera. The link will be in the description below, along with the link to the Melodious video talking about the combo and just the engine as a whole. But also, don't forget to check out my regional where I played Chimera. But with that, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe if you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content and you would like to see more. But with that, I'll see you all in the next video. See ya.